Let's talk about the Warriors, who we just mentioned a moment ago. 10-3 on this season, and they're one of the best stories in the NBA right now, which is weird to say about Golden State, a 4-time champion under Steve Kerr. But coming into this season, I think there was a widespread expectation, including my own, that this was going to be kind of a play-in-E type team, that they'd be around 500, maybe a little bit over. Maybe they battle for a 6 seed in the Western Conference, but more likely it's that 7, 8, 9, 10 range where they're in that play-in mix once again, which is right around where they were last year. This year, entirely different story. Steph is continuing to play like Steph. The guys that replaced Klay Thompson are playing pretty well. Draymond's excellent. Andrew Wiggins is back. It looks like he's back to being the guy we saw 2 years ago during their finals championship run, as opposed to the ghost of himself he was last year. You saw the Warriors play recently. What were your takeaways from watching them?
Well, it's interesting. They've definitely exceeded, I think, a lot of people's expectations as far as their start. Now, I witnessed them losing to the Clippers. Ironically, that's represented 2 of their 3 losses. The Clippers have forced, I think, a total of 40 turnovers in those 2 games. But I think what I take away is that too early to say that the Warriors are now back into NBA title contending status. But I think they're definitely out of play-in mix, and they can make a case that they could fall in 4th, 5th slot. I think, obviously, to your point, Steph Curry's been Steph Curry. He's put up the type of numbers that we've seen in recent seasons. The feeling is his gold medal run in the Olympics in Paris, it's kind of a shot in the arm, as his trainer, Brandon Payne, told me, as far as momentum and just the feel-good vibes. But I think the bigger point is that they've been, they have been better with a collection of good role players than it was with Klay Thompson. Buddy Hield and Jonathan Kuminga are among some of the league leaders in bench points. Brandon Podziemski.
They're up to that point, by the way, Mark. They're averaging almost 57 points per game off the bench. It's a huge number.
Yeah, they talk about strength in numbers, and it's very true. Now, the context of strength in numbers in that 2014-15 championship season, completely different because those were veteran-type players. But I think this strength in numbers identity is still very valuable. You have Podziemski, you got Kuminga, Moses Moody. Those are all those young core players that the Warriors are high on, but also feel they just need more and more time to develop their game even more. And then, look, they patched together a lot of good players, not great players, but good players that fulfill positional needs, like a DeAnthony Melton, a Buddy Hield, a Kyle Anderson. You add all that up, I don't think it's enough to go through Oklahoma City. They did beat Oklahoma City so far this season, but that was the game that Chet Holmgren only played 5 minutes before taking that bad fall. But they are, the real deal. I think they're going to avoid the play-in. And look, as long as you have Steph Curry on your team, technically anything is possible. But I think it's not going to be the same scenario that we saw in previous seasons, where last season they lost in the play-in. 2 years ago, they lost in the play-in as well, despite the fact that Stephen Curry was in the MVP conversation. This is a much better roster, and because of all that, you have to discount them at your peril.
Yeah, couple things. One, they're playing great on both sides, right? They're the only team in the NBA right now that's in the top 5 in offensive and defensive rating. The defense is the most impressive thing. They were top 10 last year in offensive rating, but they were 15th in the league in defensive rating last season. Right now, they're 4th defensively. So they're putting up good numbers. 1st in assists, 2nd in rebounds per game, 4th in scoring. I'm like, their offensive numbers are fantastic. I mentioned the bench points. They're really good. Buddy Hield, his offensive numbers are spectacular. So, and Draymond has been just brilliant, all season long. Like we talked about this, I think, at the start of the season. Like, his availability is a key factor in all this. Like, he's, right around this time last year, he was doing what he was doing with Rudy Gobert and getting knocked out for a string of games, and that really, I thought, set the Warriors back. This version of him, it's helping them. It's enabling them to play kind of the brand of basketball that they want to play. I mentioned Andrew Wiggins, and I want to just pull up his numbers real quick, because he to me is one of the biggest difference makers. Like, he was, what did he play, like 70-something games last year, but he was really bad. He looked like the Minnesota version of himself. Yeah, 71 games last year. Shot 36% from 3, 45% from the field. This year, the field goal percentage is still down, but the 3-point numbers are up to about 38% per game. That's about a 2.5 point jump. He's averaged about 15 points per game. He just looks more like the guy we saw during that finals year, the year he was an all-star, as opposed to the one that we saw last year. Is there anything you've seen from Wiggins specifically that stands out? I mean, I know he had a lot of personal problems last year. That's been well documented, family issues. Is it as simple as that, or is there something different about his game?
Yeah, well, obviously we can't ever discount the personal issues, and to what extent that is, only Andrew Wiggins knows for sure. But as far as how he looks on the floor, he reminds me of what you were saying during the Warriors title run in 2022, where he could basically do everything on both sides of the ball, relieve the defensive responsibilities that Klay Thompson once inherited before his slew of injuries. And I think before his personal situation, this was an expectation the Warriors had of what they would see with Andrew Wiggins last season, because he was able to recover full time with the injuries that plagued him in that second round exit against the Lakers in 2013. But to your point last season, personal issues aside, he just didn't seem very engaged. And it seemed like if his shot wasn't going in, he wasn't bringing the same kind of value defensively. And that's not what we saw during that championship run. Now, in fairness to Wiggins, he has fit in with the Warriors because he hasn't been expected to be that number one guy like he was in Minnesota. He has been more effective when he is that third, fourth option, but he wasn't even reliable enough in that vein. But I think to the point that we're making earlier, the fact that there is better roster construction that can relieve some of those scoring duties, I think really enables him to tap in with what he does best, because he, outside of Draymond Green, he's their second best a defender, and their defense, their identity has always been on defense first, offense second, even though Steph Curry has still been playing at a high level. So I'm going to consider him an X factor, just as I considered him an X factor during their title run in 2022.
Yeah, overall, I'm with you on where they're going to land. I think they're better than the play-in team I predicted, but I think end of the year, you're probably talking, maybe fighting for 4. I don't know. It's tough. The landscape is difficult in the Western Conference, but in that kind of 4, 5, 6 range, I do think the defense is going to slip a little bit. They're still undersized, and some of those guys they have, like Buddy Hield, as great as he shoots, he's not a defender. So I think there'll be some slippage there, but they're better, no question about that. And they're also an example, I think, of why not making a deal is sometimes better than making a deal. Like the Lowry market and stuff last year, you deal with Danny Ainge, you're gonna have to give up a lot to get one of his stars, and I think they're better off not having given up all they would have had to get Lowry market. I think Lowry would have fit with that team. I think he would have made some sense, but not at the price that Utah wanted to go and get him. They're here. There's their depth, their connectivity. Like there's a lot of good things going on in Golden State.